everyone, welcome to another day of art class. So today's video is going to be focusing on the basics of portraiture, how to start drawing a human face, as well as learning to lay in where roughly the eyes would go, the nose would go, and the mouth would go. So this video isn't so much about the details as much as it's understanding the basics of how to draw your face before you officially begin adding in the extra details to, again, those eyes, nose, and mouth. So without further ado, we're going to get started. Right then, so when I begin with my self-portrait, apart from starting with my paper, I also like to take under consideration what utensils I'm going to be using if I'm drawing that portrait. So personally, for beginners, I recommend using a pencil just because it's forgiving, and I think it's also one of the very first utensils that I think a lot of people tend to gravitate towards naturally, especially first starting out. So first things first, when I begin a self-portrait, I like to start with a circle. And the reason for that is because when I take under consideration just the different parts of the skull, your skull is divided naturally into three separate parts. But when we're talking about drawing the face from the front, the only parts that we're really focusing on is the front and top of the skull, which is about from the nose all the way to the top, as well as your jawline. So if I'm thinking about it that way, I'm first going to start with that circle, which again is going to give me all the information that I need from the top to about the bottom of my nose. The rest is going to determine where my jawline is. So already I'm pretty happy with how that circle pans out. The next thing that I'm going to need to do is determine the center of this circle. Because human faces are very symmetrical, it's going to be important for me to establish that first, because everything else that I do after that is going to follow. So I'm going to find roughly where the line will be vertically. I think that's pretty good right about there. So I'm going to make a little mark, and I'm just going to carry that line down all the way through the center. But what I'm also going to do is I'm not going to stop right here. I'm actually going to carry this down even more. And in establishing that jawline, the other part as well is I'm also going to roughly think about if I were to cut this line in half, roughly where would that fall, because that's going to tell me about how low my jawline is going to fall. So if I'm estimating about half of that, I'm going to approximate maybe roughly right about there. And already I'm feeling pretty good about that, so I'm just going to draw a line to kind of indicate right here is going to be the end of my jawline. Okay? So with that, now when I'm talking about my jawline, I want to think the shape of my jaw. Maybe you might think of it more as a square. Maybe there's some people that think of it kind of like a smiley face shape or an upside down rainbow. Whatever shape registers to you, that's the one that you should stick with. So to do that, I'm going to kind of rough out where my jawline would be on one side first, because the other part that I'm going to largely determine is the symmetry on the other side, and we're going to talk about that in just a moment. So feeling pretty happy about that kind of like rough jawline. So what I do to one side, I need to do to the other. And one of the ways that you can do that is called by sighting and measuring. So I'm just going to kind of think about, okay, this is about how long my jawline is, and I'm going to draw kind of a line that comes across and understand that it intersects right about here. So that means that my other line is going to intersect right about here and come down right about here. So I'm going to draw just a vertical line that slopes down and stop. And then I'm going to make that curve to the other side. And feel free to make adjustments as you go along, because that's all part of the process, especially when you're drawing a portrait. I like to just sort of establish kind of roughly what I'm working with first, and then make corrections as I go along. So don't worry if it's not quite perfect. That is perfectly okay. So already we can see that I have something that really resembles a portion of a human face. So now I can start thinking about how I'm going to register my features and where they're going to be placed on my face. So right from this line, roughly where the jawline meets, that is about my halfway point, because right now what you want to consider is what is called proportions. So proportions meaning how everything on my face is going to sit. So just as a rule of thumb, your forehead takes up about half of your face. I know. So sounds really weird, but if we can determine where our forehead is on our face, the rest of everything will be as follows. So forehead, again, is about half of the face. And that's not including your hairline, because your hairline is going to fall a little bit further down. But once I kind of approximate that this is all roughly going to be forehead, now I can start thinking about where my eyes, my nose, and my lips are going to be. So roughly about here, halfway down, is roughly where my eye level is going to fall. And I kind of just like drawing an oval to basically say that this is the area where my eyes are going to fall. So let's label that as eyes. And then basically everything from this eye line, if I'm trying to approximate where everything is going to fall, everything is going to fall now a third way down. So if I am left all of this section right here to the jaw, I'm going to cut it into approximate thirds. So this is all eyes right here, roughly about here ish is where my nose would be. So that's going to be your nose. And then a third of the way down here is roughly where my mouth is going to be. Okay? So again, your eyes, your nose, and your mouth are 1/3 of the way down. From one another. Okay, so now that I know where my eyes, my nose, and my mouth are going to be, that's roughly where I'm going to start placing them in. So, fun facts about determining where my features are going to be. If we're referring to our eyes, and if we were to basically measure the width of our face with eyes, we would have about 5 eye widths across. So to determine where our eyes are going to fall, I'm just lightly going to draw kind of 5 ovally kind of shapes, because I know that the ones that are going to be kind of center here are roughly where my eyes are going to be. So I'm just going to approximate drawing 5 little ovals across this line right here for my face. Might need to make some adjustments because that looks a little bit small. Yeah, I think I'm going to bring his jaw out, or her jaw out, just a teensy bit more. Okay, so that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 eyes across. But again, the ones that are going to matter the most to me are going to be eye number 2 and eye number 4, because those are roughly where my eyes should be anyway. Now that I have kind of where my eyes would be established, I'm also going to think about where my nose would be. So your nose, if we're coming down to this line here, is now going to fall in line with, again, eye number 2 and eye number 4. So if I were to start drawing my eyes right now, I would start looking to kind of estimate where my tear ducts would be. So my tear ducts in the front corners of my eye would roughly fall probably somewhere around here. So I'm actually going to draw a line down, and immediately that's going to tell me where the width of my nose would fall by the time that I really start thinking about my nostrils, as well as kind of maybe like the bulb of my nose. That's roughly where that is going to fall, right in alignment. And now, as you guessed it, we're going to move on to approximating where the mouth would be. So the mouth is going to be also reliant upon where the eyes would also fall as well. So if we're talking about the pupil, meaning the black part of your eye, that's going to follow roughly in the center. So I'm just going to pretend as if I were to make my pupils, but basically the ways that your eyes would work in proportion with the face for your lips would be the width of where your pupils would fall would be where the edge of your lips would roughly be. Okay? So that's establishing where the lips would be. And then the last part that I also wanted to mention too is now also thinking about where your ears would also come to. So your ears are actually going to come by the corner of your eyes and then to the bottom of your nose. And that's roughly where my ears would be. So to do that, I'm just going to draw a shape that kind of looks like a parenthesis on either side. Okay. And with that, that's basically it for the basic structure of breaking down the human face. Now, as you go on, obviously, you're going to add more details to really starting to refine the eyes, the nose, and the mouth. And maybe as you're also looking to draw your portrait or two, you'll notice that certain things will begin to change as well. Maybe you realize that the jawbone comes in a little bit more. Maybe it flares more out. Maybe your chin also becomes more narrow. Maybe your chin is bigger. Maybe you need to make the head just a little bit bigger. Or you start to realize also where your hairline is. That's okay. This is just a guide to show you roughly where things on the face will be, so that it'll be much easier for you once you begin jumping in to determine what goes where. I hope that you liked this video and you also stay tuned for more details about how to draw the eyes, the nose, and the mouth. See you soon. Bye.